Tonight, we follow the life of a midfielder who played the game through thought before movement, not through speed or aggression or spectacle, through understanding, through a kind of interior stillness that translated itself gradually into influence. He was the kind of player who could change the shape of a game without the crowd fully noticing how it happened. A pivot, a pause, a perfectly weighted pass that arrived exactly when it needed to. And then, occasionally, a quiet run into space that nobody had tracked, arriving at the right moment, in the right place, to decide something. His influence was not loud. It was structural. It was the sort of presence that holds things in place. And sometimes, without warning, tips the balance. Football often rewards the visible, the sprinter who breaks the line, the striker who rises above everyone, the dribbler who leaves defenders behind. But there is another kind of player, quieter, more precise, the one who decides where to stand before the ball arrives, the one who slows a game when it needs to be slowed and opens it when it needs to breathe, the one who appears in the penalty area at the moment no one expected him there. This story is about that player. Ilkay Gündoğan was born on October 24th, 1990, in Gelsenkirchen, a city in the Ruhr region of Western Germany. The Ruhr is an industrial region. Cities like Gelsenkirchen carry a particular kind of character, working, direct, built on labor and community. It is not a glamorous region, but it has always been deeply serious about football. His parents had come to Germany from Turkey, part of a larger migration that shaped the social fabric of the Ruhr over several decades. His father, İlkay Gündoğan, had played football at a modest level. The game was not foreign to the household. It was present, understood, encouraged. But it was not treated as a guaranteed path. It was something to be worked at, like everything else. Growing up in Gelsenkirchen meant growing up within range of Schalke 04, one of Germany's most storied clubs. Football culture was not abstract in that environment. It was in the streets, in the conversation of adults, in the rhythm of a Saturday afternoon. For a child interested in the game, the influences were immediate and real. He began playing organized football at a young age, as many German children do, cycling through the structured academy system that German clubs operate with considerable seriousness. Youth football in Germany is not casual. By the time a player reaches his teenage years, he has been observed, coached, and assessed in systematic ways. The environment rewards quality, but it also reveals character. How a young player responds to instruction, how he handles difficulty, how he positions himself in relation to his teammates. These things are noted. Gündoğan moved through the youth system with quiet diligence. He was not the player who overwhelmed you with raw physical gifts. What became apparent over time was something less measurable, but more enduring. He read the game earlier than other players his age. He saw the next moment before it arrived. He seemed even then to understand football as a spatial problem, a question of positioning, timing, and anticipation, rather than simply a physical one. His dual heritage was simply part of who he was. He grew up German in the fullest sense, educated in German schools, embedded in German football structures. At the same time, the Turkish dimension of his background was real and present in the household. He would later hold both German and Turkish citizenship. He would make decisions about international football that were complicated and considered. But that would come later. In childhood, the layers of identity were simply lived rather than analyzed. He joined the youth academy at VfL Bochum, another club from the Ruhr with a long football history. Bochum was not glamorous, in the same way that the region itself was not glamorous, but it was serious. The youth setup there provided him with the kind of structured development that would carry him forward. His time at Bochum's reserve side gave him early exposure to professional level demands without immediate pressure. He was learning not just the technical elements of passing or movement, but the habits of a professional. How to prepare, how to recover, how to sustain focus across a full training week. The emotional and physical discipline required to perform consistently at a high level is not automatic. It has to be built. Those years at Bochum were part of that construction. Word spread, in the way that word spreads within German football circles, about a young central midfielder with uncommon clarity of thought. He was not flashy. He was not a headline-making prodigy, but coaches and scouts who watched him carefully noticed that he made good decisions, consistently under pressure. That consistency is rarer than it sounds. He moved to 1 FC Nuremberg in 2009. Nuremberg was, at that point, a stable mid-table Bundesliga side, a respectable club with genuine professional standards. Playing there meant real competition, real scrutiny. It meant having to prove himself not in youth football, but against men who had been playing at this level for years. His development at Nuremberg was gradual. He did not arrive as a finished product, but what he showed, season by season, was steady improvement. He became more influential. His ball retention improved. His ability to receive the ball under pressure and maintain composure while doing something productive with it became more reliable. The game around him looked calmer when he was involved. That is the mark of a midfielder who is doing things correctly. There is a particular kind of praise that experienced coaches offer that sounds modest but carries weight. Not the headline praise of someone who has scored a spectacular goal or made a headline tackle, but the observation that a player is always in the right position, that the team functions better with him on the pitch, that he makes the work of those around him easier. This is what Gundogan was beginning to earn. By 2011, he had attracted the attention of Borussia Dortmund. This was not a minor development. Dortmund, at that moment, were on the verge of something significant. Jürgen Klopp had been their manager since 2008, and he was reshaping the club's identity with forceful energy. Dortmund under Klopp were becoming a serious force in German and European football. To join them was to step into an environment that was demanding, intense, and highly specific in what it asked of a footballer. The contrast with Nuremberg was significant. Dortmund under Klopp played at high tempo. The pressing was relentless. The transitions were fast. The demands on every player's energy and positioning were continuous. This was not a system that accommodated passengers. You had to contribute constantly, in and out of possession. What Klopp wanted from his midfielders was a combination of high work rate and technical quality. The pressing game required everyone to be disciplined in their defensive shape and aggressive in winning the ball back. But Klopp also valued intelligence. He valued players who could read the moment, when to press, when to hold, when to release the ball quickly, and when to carry it into space. Gundogan brought that reading to the Dortmund midfield. Klopp recognized something in him that went beyond technical ability. He saw a player who was adaptable, who could slow the game down in moments when Dortmund needed to recover their shape, and who could accelerate it when the moment called for a sudden shift. That duality, the ability to control tempo, to understand when the game needed to breathe and when it needed to burst, is not something you can drill into a player. It is a perceptual quality. The 2011-12 season was Gundogan's first at Dortmund. The club won the Bundesliga that year, their second consecutive title. He was part of a midfield that combined energy and intelligence. His contribution was often the steadying element in a team that played with great intensity. When the pressing game created spaces and opportunities, he was frequently the one who chose how to use them with care rather than haste. The culture at Dortmund under Klopp was famously emotional. Klopp himself was expressive, loud, warm, physically engaged with what was happening on the pitch. But his emotion was always tactical. The noise and the energy were not random. They were in service of a very specific football idea. Gundogan absorbed the tactical DNA of that system, while maintaining his own internal steadiness. Training at Dortmund in that period was demanding in ways that were also instructive. Klopp used training sessions to reinforce the principles his teams played by. The shape in possession, the triggers for the press, the transitions, these were drilled constantly. For a player like Gundogan, who already processed the game intellectually, the structured environment allowed him to refine his understanding at a higher level of complexity. The 2012-13 season brought Dortmund to the final of the UEFA Champions League. They faced Bayern Munich at Wembley, a German derby on European football's largest stage. The match itself was tense and contested. Dortmund had reached the final through performances of considerable quality, overcoming Real Madrid on the way. The final was lost. Bayern won. But the journey had demonstrated something about Dortmund's standing in European football and about the quality of the players within that squad. For Gundogan personally, the season had been about continued growth. He was becoming recognized not just within Germany, but within the wider European game as one of the more technically accomplished central midfielders of his generation. He played with a precision that was visually understated. The passes were not dramatic, the positioning was not acrobatic, but the effect was accumulative. Over 90 minutes, his influence was measurable in the clarity and efficiency he gave to everything around him. Then came an interruption that would test the qualities of patience and equanimity that he had been building throughout his career. In early 2013, Gundogan suffered a serious back injury. A herniated disc. Surgery followed, and then the long, uncertain process of rehabilitation. A back injury for a professional footballer is not simply a physical setback. It is a disruption of the entire rhythm of professional life. The structures of training, travel, match day, all of it pauses. The footballer's identity, which is so thoroughly bound up with movement and participation, is placed in suspension. What remains is the self without the football. The practice of recovery requires a different kind of discipline than playing. It requires sustained patience in conditions where progress is slow and not always visible. Gundogan missed significant time. He was largely absent through the second half of the 2012-13 season and into the following year. The recovery was measured in small increments. The body needed time. The back is unforgiving in this respect. You cannot rush structural healing. Any attempt to accelerate the process risks making things worse. What he later described, in various interviews and reflections, was a period of significant internal adjustment. The enforced distance from the game gave him perspective on it. When you cannot play, you understand differently what it means to play. The things you might have taken for granted, the feel of a training session, the tactical problem-solving of a match, acquire a different weight when they are absent. Psychologically, long injury periods test a player's relationship with uncertainty. There is a particular discipline in committing to a process whose endpoint is unclear. In continuing to do the work, the physical therapy, the conditioning, the careful reintegration, without knowing exactly when it will be over. That kind of sustained effort in conditions of uncertainty is a form of mental strength. It is not glamorous. It doesn't appear in highlight reels, but it shapes a player in ways that are real. His return to the Dortmund squad was managed carefully. He was not rushed back. The staff and the player understood that sustainable recovery was more important than early return. When he did come back, the quality he showed, the clarity of decision-making, the comfort with the ball, the spatial intelligence, confirmed that the essential parts of his game had not been lost. But his time at Dortmund after the injury was more limited. The club's form had shifted. The dominance of the 2011-12 period had given way to a more complicated picture. And Gundogan's own situation, his contract, his future, his ambitions, was being considered. In the summer of 2016, he made a decision that represented a major step. He signed for Manchester City. Pep Guardiola had just become City's manager, beginning what would become one of the most influential coaching tenures in the history of English football. To join City in Guardiola's first season was to enter an environment in active construction. Guardiola had brought a specific vision of how football should be played, one that demanded extraordinary technical quality, physical intelligence, and the willingness to perform within a highly detailed system. He had implemented versions of this vision at Barcelona and Bayern Munich. Now he was bringing it to the Premier League. But Gundogan's first season at City was severely disrupted. In December 2016, in a league match against Watford, he suffered a cruciate ligament injury to his right knee. He would be absent for the majority of the season. Two serious injuries in his career, each taking him away from the game for extended periods. The pattern might have broken a less resilient character. The frustration of joining a new club, in a new country, under one of the most acclaimed coaches in the world, and then being unable to participate for months, requires something that goes beyond physical endurance. It requires a clear-eyed understanding of your own situation and a commitment to process over outcome. During this second major rehabilitation, he was at City's training ground. He was watching, listening, learning the system. He was understanding Guardiola's football from a different vantage point, not from within the pitch, but from beside it. When he eventually returned, he would already be conversant with what was being built. His physical absence had not prevented his intellectual engagement with the work. Guardiola's methods are famously detailed. Positional play, the occupation of space, the creation of superiority in specific zones of the pitch, the management of transitions, is central to everything he asks of his players. He is demanding in ways that sometimes surprise even experienced professionals. His expectations around positioning are exacting. He wants players to understand not just what to do in their specific role, but why that role exists in relation to every other role on the pitch. This kind of football is exactly suited to a player like Gundogan. His intelligence was already oriented toward understanding the game spatially. Guardiola gave him a framework that matched and extended that intelligence. The system asked of him precisely the things he did best: the ability to receive the ball in tight spaces, to make quick, accurate decisions under pressure, to control the tempo of play from central positions. As he recovered and reintegrated into the squad through the 2017-18 season, the relationship between Gundogan and Guardiola developed. It was not the relationship of a coach imposing a system on a reluctant player, but of two people who understood football in similar ways, finding a productive common language. City won the Premier League title in 2017-18 with a record number of points. It was a season of considerable dominance. Gundogan contributed, growing into his role in the system, understanding better with each month how the pieces of Guardiola's design fitted together. His role evolved over the following seasons. He was not always the most prominent figure in the midfield. Kevin De Bruyne was the creative driving force. Fernandinho was the disciplined anchor. Gundogan found his place in this configuration. Adaptable, precise, capable of doing multiple things within the structure. He could hold possession. He could play forward. He could drop into the defensive shape when the team needed it. He could emerge from deep positions to threaten the goal. The 2020-21 season was, in this respect, one of the most striking of his career. He scored 15 Premier League goals, a remarkable total for a central midfielder. The goals came from late runs into the penalty area, from decisive moments in matches where he made himself available and composed in front of goal. He was not a striker, but he understood, with the same spatial intelligence he applied to everything else, where to be and when to arrive. He moved into spaces that defenders were not tracking because they were not expecting him there. That element of unexpectedness, rooted in intelligence, not deception, was part of what made those goals possible. He spoke in that period about understanding his role within the system, about trust in Guardiola's structure, about the freedom that comes from knowing your responsibilities so well that within them you can find genuine expression. That is not a paradox. It is the nature of all highly developed craft. The framework, when understood deeply enough, becomes a source of freedom rather than a constraint. Guardiola spoke about him with a directness that was meaningful, coming from a coach who chooses his words carefully. He described Gundogan as one of the most intelligent players he had ever worked with. Coming from Guardiola, who had coached Xavi, Iniesta, David Silva, and Sergio Busquets, that was not a casual assessment. Teammates, in various comments over the years, described his presence in terms of reliability and calm. He was not the player who demanded the ball or sought the spotlight. But when he had the ball, things happened correctly. The pass arrived on time and in the right place. The movement opened space for someone else. The decision was appropriate for what the moment needed. In football, reliability of this kind is genuinely rare. His captaincy at Manchester City came gradually. He was appointed club captain in the 2022-23 season, which would prove to be his final year at the club. The appointment recognized something that had been evident for some time: his standing within the group, the respect he commanded from teammates and staff, the example he set through his own conduct. Leadership through behavior is a particular kind of leadership. It does not announce itself. It does not perform. It is visible in the consistency of how someone approaches their work, the attention to detail in a training session, the composure in a difficult period of a match, the seriousness with which feedback is received and processed. These things communicate something to teammates that words alone cannot. They establish a standard through daily practice rather than declaration. The 2022-23 season at Manchester City was historically significant. The club won the Premier League, the FA Cup, and the Champions League, the first English club to win the treble since Manchester United in 1999. Gundogan played a crucial role throughout the campaign. In the FA Cup final against Manchester United, he scored twice, including a goal within seconds of the match beginning. In the Champions League final, played in Istanbul, he was on the pitch as City defeated Inter Milan to claim the trophy the club had pursued for so long. To captain the side in that season, to be the person who lifted the Premier League trophy, who led the group through what turned out to be the defining achievement of that era, was a measure of everything that had been built over 7 years. The 2 serious injuries, the long absences, the patient accumulation of understanding. the gradual earning of trust. All of it arrived at this point. He had joined the club as a talented midfielder who was injured almost immediately. He left as the captain who lifted the Champions League trophy. The journey between those 2 points was not dramatic in the way that football narratives often present journeys. It was gradual, consistent, intelligent. It was built on small good decisions made repeatedly over many years. His departure from Manchester City in the summer of 2023 was announced before the treble was formally complete. He had decided to try something different. FC Barcelona had approached him, and the move made sense. A return to a club with a philosophical alignment to his way of playing, a chance to contribute to a new project at a storied institution. Barcelona, in that period, were in reconstruction. Xavi Hernandez was managing the club, attempting to restore a recognizable version of Barcelona's football identity after several difficult years. Gundogan was brought in as an experienced, technically accomplished figure who understood positional football at the deepest level. His presence in midfield was intended to stabilize and guide. The adjustment to Barcelona required the kind of flexible professionalism that he had demonstrated throughout his career. A new club, a new city, a new language context, a new set of teammates, a different tactical framework. None of these were unfamiliar categories of challenge. He had moved between different systems throughout his career and had always found a way to make himself useful within new structures. At Barcelona, he was given significant responsibility. He captained the side. His experience, particularly his years under Guardiola at City, gave him a credibility within the squad that did not need to be asserted. It was simply recognized. He had been part of one of the most successful teams in recent European football history. The knowledge embedded in that experience was real and applicable. He also contributed in ways that were not purely on pitch. His presence had an organizing effect on younger players around him. How you prepare, how you train, how you engage with tactical instruction, how you handle a difficult run of form. These things are demonstrated by example in a locker room. A player who has been through long injuries, who has performed at the highest level, consistently across many years, who has won the biggest trophies, communicates something through how he conducts himself that is difficult to teach in any other way. His time at Barcelona was part of a larger career transition. He had reached the stage where his contribution was increasingly about the intelligence and experience he brought to a team, rather than the physical dynamism that marks younger players. The highest form of a central midfielder's career tends to look like this: a gradual shift toward controlling the game through positioning and decision-making, becoming more economical with movement while maintaining or even increasing effectiveness. His move to Galatasaray marked another transition. Galatasaray, one of Turkey's most prominent clubs, offered him a connection to a part of his heritage that had always been present, but which had not been his primary professional context. Playing in the Super League brought a new set of challenges and a new environment. Turkish football has its own character, passionate, intense, with significant demands placed on key players by clubs with large and engaged supporter bases. Within that environment, Gundogan's role was that of an experienced central organizer. He brought to Galatasaray the same qualities he had brought everywhere else: technical precision, positional intelligence, calmness under pressure, the ability to control the tempo of the game from the center of the pitch. In a league context that placed different demands on midfielders than the Premier League or La Liga, those qualities retained their value. His influence on younger players at Galatasaray followed the same pattern it had elsewhere. Football knowledge, at the level Gundogan had accumulated it, becomes a kind of asset that benefits everyone around the player. How he moved to receive the ball, how he managed tight situations, how he positioned himself between lines. These were observable things that younger players could learn from, simply by paying attention. Running parallel to his club career throughout all of this was a long and sometimes complicated relationship with the Germany national team. He had come through the German youth system and had represented Germany at under-21 level. His international career at senior level began in 2011. Germany was, in that period and through the decade that followed, one of the most consistently competitive international sides in the world. His experience with Germany included major tournaments that represent both the heights and the difficulties of international football. In 2014, he was part of the squad that won the World Cup in Brazil. That tournament, which ended with Mario Götze's extra-time goal against Argentina, was the peak of a German generation that had been developing for several years. To be part of that group, to hold a World Cup winners' medal, was significant, regardless of individual playing time or prominence. The dynamics of international football are different from club football. You play less frequently. The preparation time is compressed. The tactical coherence that a club builds over months of daily work together has to be approximated in days. Players arrive from different systems, different forms, different states of mind. The management of this compressed complexity is one of the distinctive challenges of international management. His role within the German squad changed over time. He became a senior figure in the group, someone whose experience spanned multiple tournaments and multiple generations of the German team. The German national team went through a significant transition in the late 2000s, following the disappointing early exit at the 2018 World Cup in Russia. The squad was being rebuilt, with younger players coming through, and the team searching for its next identity. Gundogan contributed to Germany through this period of adjustment, offering the stability of experience in a context of change. He was made captain of the national team, a recognition of his standing within German football and the respect he commanded in the squad. The experience of captaining a national team carries different weight than captaining a club side. The national team context is more episodic, more politically complex, more public in certain ways. The captain's role is partly ceremonial, partly motivational, partly symbolic. It requires an ability to represent a large and diverse group of people through how you carry yourself in public moments. His dual German-Turkish identity had occasionally been a topic of public discussion in Germany. Questions about belonging, about identity, about what it means to represent a country with a complex immigration history. These are not simple questions. He navigated them with consistent thoughtfulness. He was clear about being German, clear about his Turkish roots, clear that both things were true simultaneously and without contradiction. His experience mirrored that of many people in Germany and across Europe who carry multiple cultural inheritances and who find that this complexity, while sometimes requiring explanation, is ultimately a richness rather than a problem. The game he played was, in many ways, an expression of the qualities he brought to everything. The ability to occupy multiple roles, to be comfortable in transitional spaces, to find equilibrium under pressure. Football, for him, was never only about the physical. It was always also an intellectual and emotional undertaking. The preparation mattered as much as the performance. The process mattered as much as the outcome. Klopp, in various settings over the years, spoke about Gundogan in ways that revealed the depth of respect between them. Klopp, who tends to be effusive in his praise when he feels it genuinely, was warm and precise about what made Gundogan valuable: the ability to see the game clearly and act accordingly, the capacity to lead without loudness, the commitment to preparation and to doing things correctly across the entire length of a career. The training ground, in the accounts of those who have worked with him, was where much of the essential character was visible. Not in the formal press conferences or the match-day performances, but in the daily work, the attention he paid to the details of sessions, the way he responded to correction, the seriousness with which he approached even the repetitive work of conditioning and tactical rehearsal. These are the things that sustain a career over 15 years at the highest level. They are not glamorous. They are consistent. There is something in the relationship between a footballer's intelligence and their longevity that is worth noticing. The most physically gifted players sometimes burn brighter, but shorter. The player who understands the game intellectually, who can adapt, who can modify their contribution as physical capacities evolve, who can maintain value within systems through positioning and decision-making rather than speed or power alone, tends to maintain relevance longer. Gundogan's career demonstrated this pattern. He remained an important figure in top-level football well into his 30s, because what he brought to a team was not primarily physical, it was cognitive. The midfield is the part of the pitch where this kind of intelligence is most visible and most valued. Defenders can sometimes compensate through physicality. Forwards can succeed with pace and instinct. Midfielders, especially central midfielders tasked with controlling the game, must understand space, time, and tempo at a level that requires genuine cognitive sophistication. Gundogan understood these things as deeply as any midfielder of his generation. The passes that changed the direction of a match were often not the ones that looked spectacular. They were the ones that arrived at the right moment, to the right foot, in the right area of the pitch, enabling the next action. The pass that releases a forward into space. The pass back to the goalkeeper that resets the team's shape and forces the opposition to reorganize. The pass sideways that shifts the block and creates an angle. None of these show up clearly in statistics, but they are the grammar of controlled football. He also understood the game in its relational dimension. Football is a team activity, and one of the things that marks the most intelligent players is their awareness of how their decisions affect not just immediate outcomes, but the confidence and positioning of everyone around them. A midfielder who makes good decisions consistently does something specific for the players around him. He makes the game feel simpler. The defenders feel more secure because the ball is managed well in front of them. The forwards feel more supported because the service they receive is reliable. This relational intelligence extended to how he operated in the locker room and in meetings. He was not a player who dominated the conversational space. He was not the one making speeches. But when he did speak, it was considered, and it carried weight. The players who had been around football long enough to understand what genuine expertise sounded like recognized it in what he said. His preparation for matches was methodical. The study of opponents, the understanding of tactical briefings, the mental rehearsal of situations likely to arise. These were not things he did superficially. He treated the cognitive preparation as seriously as the physical preparation. The two are, in reality, inseparable at the highest level. A player who is physically ready but mentally unclear will make hesitant decisions. A player who is tactically prepared and mentally clear will use their physical resources efficiently without hesitation. There were moments across the career where the full picture of what he was came into focus for outside observers, journalists, analysts, rival coaches, in a way that summarized everything cleanly. The Champions League final in Istanbul in 2023, the FA Cup final goal that came within seconds of the opening whistle, the long-range passes in high-pressure moments that found teammates in exactly the right positions. The way he walked off the pitch after difficult matches, not with frustration but with the steady look of someone who would process what had happened and return to work with clarity. His contribution to football was not reducible to any single moment or any single club. It was the accumulation of correct decisions over a long career, in different countries, under different managers, in different tactical systems. The consistency of that quality across different contexts is itself a form of excellence. He played through an era when football was becoming increasingly physical, when the demands on midfielders were intensifying, when the systems were becoming more intricate, and the analytical scrutiny was becoming more detailed. He adapted continuously, not by reinventing himself dramatically, but by continuing to develop his understanding and by applying it within whatever structure he was asked to function in. The tactical evolution of football across the 2010 and into the 2020 was significant. The pressing game that Klopp had introduced at Dortmund became widely adopted. The positional play that Guardiola refined at City became a reference point for clubs around the world. Gundogan had been immersed in both of these systems from the inside, at the highest level. That depth of experiential understanding was unusual. He had not just observed these football ideas from the outside. He had lived inside them, been shaped by them, and contributed to their evolution. The Germany national team's tournament at Euro 2024, hosted in Germany, brought the national team into sharp focus for the country. Gundogan's role in that tournament was as a senior figure, a captain, someone whose experience and composure were resources for the group. International tournaments are emotionally charged in specific ways. The compressed timeline, the national significance, the public scrutiny that test players and groups differently than club football. His presence was stabilizing in that context. Beyond football, he engaged with the public world thoughtfully. His comments on social and political matters were measured. He did not seek controversy, but he also did not avoid questions about identity, belonging, and the responsibilities of a public figure. The conversations about his Turkish and German heritage, about what football means in a multicultural society, about what example professional athletes provide. He approached these with the same considered quality that he brought to everything else. There is a particular form of integrity in staying true to how you actually are across very different contexts. Public scrutiny invites performance. It asks people to become larger, simpler, more legible than they really are. Gundogan did not become that simplified version. He remained, across the years and the changing contexts of his career, essentially himself. The environments around him changed significantly across 15 years. The clubs, the leagues, the teammates, the managers, the tactical systems, all of it was in continuous flux. What remained consistent was the quality of his engagement with each new context, the willingness to learn, the patience with process, the application of intelligence to whatever problem was in front of him. That consistency over the length of a serious career in top-level football is its own form of achievement. It does not produce a single defining image. It does not generate one signature moment that encapsulates everything. It produces something less photogenic but more durable, a record of reliable, intelligent contribution across many years, many clubs, many systems, many matches. The career of a central midfielder often ends in the public memory before it is fully understood. The creative forward is remembered for the goals. The commanding defender is remembered for the crucial blocks. The midfielder is often remembered most clearly by the coaches and teammates who experienced from the inside what his presence contributed. Klopp remembered. Guardiola remembered. The players who received his passes in the right moment, at the right foot, remember. His name belongs in any serious conversation about the midfielders who shaped European football across the first quarter of the 21st century. Not with the loudest voice in that conversation, but with a clear one. A player who built his career on the understanding that influence does not require spectacle. That control is more difficult than acceleration. That the game is, at its deepest level, a problem of thought, of reading what is happening, anticipating what will happen, and making small, precise decisions in the space between. The long recovery rooms during injury, the early morning training sessions under grey-rua sky, the tactical meetings at Dortmund where Klopp drew shapes on whiteboards, the months of rehabilitation in Manchester, learning a system from beside the pitch before he could participate in it, the Champions League final in Istanbul, where everything arrived, the pass that found the right player, the movement that no one else had tracked, the quiet word in a difficult dressing room, the posture of someone who has been through difficulty and has not been diminished by it. A midfielder who did not need to rush the game because he understood it before it unfolded. A presence that remained steady, even as everything around him changed. The pace slows. The noise fades. And in that quiet control, the game becomes still. Good night.